Rev up your engines! All right, the Nissan Altima. Today you're going to learn the truth. The good, the bad, and the ugly. The guy says some days he hates it, and some days he loves it. So let's go through what he's got, and did he make a wise decision buying this car used for $6,000 a couple of years ago? It's a Nissan Altima. Now, truth be told, they're a lot better looking than they used to be. You check out the early ones, they're pretty ugly. Now, it's a decent looking car, and this is the 2.5S. Now, the 2.5S is what you want because as we look under the hood, that means it has a 2.5 liter, 4-cylinder inline engine. And actually, that's one of the best engines that Nissan ever made. Decent power and decent gas mileage. If he doesn't push it, he get 30 miles a gallon on this thing on the highway. He paid $6,000 for it. It still shifts good. He hasn't any problems with the CVT. It doesn't leak or burn any oil between oil changes. And it was assembled in the US. You ever want to know, all you got to do is look at the VIN number. This one starts with a 1. That means it was in the United States. And it kind of gives it away when it says manufactured by Nissan Motor Company Limited. You know it's not made in Japan, because if it was, it would say made in Japan here. Mind you, the engine transmission, it's made in Japan. They put them together here. As we get inside, relatively sporty looking. Black and chrome. Thing got a sunroof. This is the S. This is the fancier one. And as we turn the key on, we can see it does have a tiny little screen. Now that's a tiny screen. We'll start her up. Camera works fine. It's got a nice color to it. It's just small. You got to get used to small in this thing. As you can see, it's got 124,000 miles on it now, and it has an exhaust leak. Now, it's kind of a funny story. He bought it used. He bought it from a place called Nano's Auto in Massachusetts. His friend said, get that exhaust fixed. So he gets it, and the exhaust noise is gone. But it turns out the guy's just put a piece of aluminum tape around the thing, which quickly blew off. Now, he has been driving it this way for a little while. It still runs okay, but pretty sleazy deal. Now, you see that with used car lots all the time. They just want to fix something as cheap as they possibly can, not put any money into stuff whatsoever. Now, the same used car lot tried to sell his friend a Jeep that was all rusted out. He covered it with grease and stuff to try to hide the rust, but he quick ran and said to his friend, don't buy that thing. He just covered all the rust up with grease. So the guy didn't buy the Jeep, and that's a good warning. Let me tell you something. Jeeps rust like no tomorrow. You're going to buy one, check it out for rust. Get a magnet. Make sure that it isn't all Bondo where it won't stick. Even if you're planning on doing one over and buying one cheaper, at least look at the Jeep's frame. Because if the frame's rotten, don't buy it. Jeeps are pretty small, a lot of aftermarket, but if the frame's rotten on a Jeep, run away. In this case, the whole thing was rotten. The particular car is an interesting story. It started out as a rental car in North Carolina. Then a guy bought it in New Hampshire, and then he bought it at the used car lot. Now, they do rust-proof them a lot better than they did, as you can see. It's all solid. There's no rotten parts around the wheel wells. On the other side, we'll see there's some pieces off. Well, people have run into them. You can't blame that on the car, you know. You can see here, got whacked in the back, but what we care about is what's going on underneath. So, let's go under here. Look around. And as we look around, this thing has been up north for quite some time, and there's no rust. It is in solid shape. So, it's a solid car. It's not rusted, even though it's up north. They do a pretty good job with undercoating and rust proofing on these unibody cars. Rust isn't a problem that they have. The old Datsun rusted like mad, but that was decades ago. That's not something these things really have. The main problem with these are the CVT transmissions. Infamous Jatco CVT transmission. Now, he's been driving it a couple years and it still works. Now, he does admit, going downhill, it'll start revving up a little, but he says it's been doing that the whole time. It hasn't really gotten any worse. And he drives it relatively hard. And strangely enough, I think the family has good luck because his father had 170,000 miles in 3 years on the same year Altima, and the transmission is still working. But, see, that tells you, he did that in 3 years. Highway driving. Highway driving is equivalent to 10% city driving. There is no way in Hades that I've ever seen one of these with 170,000 miles of city stop and go traffic with the transmission hasn't broken once or twice already. And they can last if you put a lot of miles on in a short period of time. as an example. I had a customer in Houston. He drove like a lunatic. He put 100,000 miles on his every year. And he had 250, it was still running pretty good. But that's all highway driving at highway speed. So it's not something that you're going to get stop and go traffic. If you drive a lot of mileage in the short run, hey, one of these might work out perfectly fine. If you're going to think you're going to get 20, 30 years and get 200-something thousand miles, you'd be living in dreamland. Now we'll hook up the fancy scan tool, turn the key on, the idiot lights are on. Hey, this baby's got electric seats. Like I say, it's the S. Fancier one. We'll see what kind of shape this thing is in. Intelligent diagnosis. It's updating itself. Baby updates pretty fast, I'll give it that. We'll go to diagnosis. Knows the VIN number. We'll do the full system diagnosis. And here we go. It is 13 years old, 2010, so it'll take a little while to go through this, but it's worthwhile waiting. And while we're waiting, let's face it, it's not a bad looking car. Yeah, the back seat, it's a two-door. There's enough room, nothing outrageous, but the back seats are flipped down. You can stick a lot in the trunk. You can see while we're waiting, I started it up, charging system's working. As we can see, the tire pressure monitoring system isn't working right. The seatbelt light's on, but that'll come up in the codes too to see why that's not working. Probably a sensor. Now, it's kind of a typical Nissan. You can see the body control module has 17 codes, but the ECM is good, so we know that it's running okay. And as we can see, the TCM has 3 codes, and we can also see the airbag light is on, so there's a problem with that system too. Now, this is something I find wrong with Nissans all the time. As they age, their electrical systems tend to go gaga, and all kinds of things start breaking down. In that sense, Nissan is kind of like Fords. They make good engines, fast, zippy cars, but their electric systems leave a bit to be desired as they age, and the complex electronics start breaking down, and things you end up living with. Like the tire pressure monitoring system doesn't work. Get a pressure gauge, get a tire gauge to measure it instead of spending hundreds replacing sensors. Stuff like that you can live with, but we want to see the overall situation of this car. The instrument cluster has communication circuit and a speed meter problem. The body control module has a whole bunch of codes. Look at this insanity. Communication code, vehicle speed code, low voltage, shift position status, clutch switch for park neutral. Another one, a relay problem, engine state signal loss, push button ignition switch, engine battery, no receiving. Flat tire, right rear. So basically, if it thinks the tires are flat, it just thinks so. That's why the tire pressure monitoring system, it's not working. Who cares? You can ignore that. I often see this on Nissans. Vehicle speed signal error. Because these Jatco CVT transmissions, they start wearing and they give wrong data, trips codes, even though it's shifting okay. And as we can see, just what I said, the transmission control module shows vehicle speed signal isn't perfect going to it, and that the up-down shift switch here is not working correctly. You can see if you want to shift it manually, you can shift it that way. Turn the car off. We're going to clear the codes, get rid of them. So here we go. We can hear the exhaust leak, but I mean, hey, it runs good enough. It's a typical smaller car. We'll hit some bumps. And we can feel them a little, but truthfully, it rides better than my wife's Matrix. It's got a smoother ride. And as bumpy as this road is, hey, doesn't feel bad, doesn't make lots of noises. For a car with 125,000 miles, he drives it from 100 to 120 miles a day when he's delivering stuff. So he puts a lot of miles on it, but they're highway miles. Now we're at the dangerous corner here, but there's nobody coming now, so here we go. Hey, it makes noises like a motorboat, but hey, it goes. And if you notice, the traction control did work. I was leery about flooring it because my car's done a traction control, but when I finally did floor it, it didn't slide or anything. The traction control system works quite well. We'll check a little passing after that guy gets out of the way. Decent acceleration. That's why if you get one of these, you want to get the 2.5S, because the 2.5 liter engine has plenty of horsepower to get you from here to there without having any problems. It doesn't burn any oil, doesn't leak any oil. It's got 125,000 miles on it. So basically, it's a very good engine. Only if it had a 6-speed standard, boy, it'd be a scream to drive. Back in the day, I had customers with the S's with the standard transmissions. They were 5 speeds then, and they were absolute screamers to drive around. And a Nissan, really, it's got nice handling characteristics. Doesn't particularly understeer or oversteer, and being front wheel drive, hey, it works good enough in the snow. And he lives outside of Boston. He doesn't put snow tires on it in the snow. And he says it goes like a tank in the snow. You know, they have snow plows in Boston. If you go on a paved road, any tires are going to be perfectly good as long as you use decent tires. He doesn't even bother putting them on these things, and he has no problems. He doesn't get stuck. We're checking it out again after driving. You can see the PCM isn't doing anything yet. You get glitches like that. Some of those glitches, they're communication glitches. No one knows the history of this car. He bought it from a used car lot, right? And they don't have equipment like I do. I've seen many of these Nissans come to me, and a bunch of the codes are because the battery had been replaced and they didn't reset anything, because he's got himself a little cheap Innova. You know, for what it is, it's cheap, but it gives you codes. But when you reset stuff with that, you're not resetting these communication codes and everything. So who knows? Maybe somebody never reset anything in this car in the last 13 years when things were replaced. So as you can see, yeah, there's no problems. Everything's green again. All the red stuff's gone. Didn't come back. So the owner was asking me, should he keep it? Should he get rid of it? Well, he's put 25,000 miles on it. Hasn't really put any money into the thing. Transmission is still working perfectly fine. Now, he knows enough about cars that he knows what it's like when these CVTs go out. So if it starts going, he's going to get rid of it for sure, because he's not going to put money into the CVT transmission. But as it stands now, it's working pretty much as it did when it was new. It shifts fine. It doesn't wobble. It doesn't shake. And he's still getting 30 miles a gallon if he drives on the highway going 65 miles an hour. So I'm telling him, keep it. As the saying goes, better the devil you know than the devil you don't. I'll give you a perfect example. Last year I had a guy in Tennessee. He bought a Lexus ES250. Looks like a beautiful car. He brings it to me. I start checking out. I said, why did you buy this thing? He says, the engine's all worn out. The spark plugs were covered with carbon crud, crusted on, and it started to misfire. And he said, well, I just bought it for $8,500 because, you know, you say Lexuses are good. I said, did you have anybody check it out? He said, no. He just went to the Lexus dealer, got it, and it was the usual as is, no warranty, right? Just because it's a Lexus doesn't mean it's a good car if it wasn't taken care of. In this case, it was obviously taken care of by the previous owners. Paid $6 grand. He's put 25,000 miles without throwing any money into it yet. I'm not a fan. I wouldn't buy one of these cars. But if I was buying one, it definitely would have the 2.5 liter engine in it. I'd like it better with the standard transmission, but that's another story. You see a 2.5S, a cheap enough price. It still runs and goes good. But don't be like a guy with a Lexus. Have a guy like me check it out before you buy, because you're going to get a lot of leverage anyways. Let's say I checked this out, say he was buying it instead of already owning it. I'd show all those codes, and I'd say, take a picture of them all. And he could get his phone, take a picture of them all. Then when he goes back and say, look at all the problems this car has. I'm going to pay a lot less money for it. There's always a reason you can get a better price if you've got bad data. The bad data, in this case, doesn't mean all there much. It's mainly communication codes, minor things. As long as that transmission shifts and it's got the engine like that that doesn't burn oil, I'd keep driving it around. And I mean, in a pinch, with the engine in the shape this is in, doesn't burn oil, gets good gas mileage. Even if the CV transmission went out, I had a guy just get one done over and it cost him $3,500. Well, hey, let's say it went out and it's still running good. $3,500, you're not going to get squat these days. Maybe put a remanufactured transmission with a warranty in one if it does finally go out. He's doing a lot of highway driving, so it's a lot less wear. Now, the owner, he thought coming over here, I was going to say, get rid of that piece of crap because he watches my videos and I talk about Nissans, right? But in this case, he's got it, it's running, it doesn't burn oil, it's the good 2.5 liter engine in it, and it still shifts good. Like I said, even if the transmission went out, you could put a CVT transmission in it. It's a smaller car, it's a smaller transmission, it's not like a big old truck where it costs a fortune. You could get one. I had a guy had one go out under warranty when he had like 65,000 miles, right? They put another CVT in it, didn't cost him anything. He put another 100,000 miles in, it's still running. So, hey, when they remanufacture these, a lot of times they find the flaws and they fix them. So, yes, I wouldn't buy one of these, but he did. And I'm saying, keep driving it. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.